This week on my website, I'm going to feature my recipes, plural, for pesto. What I did was I experimented with making different kinds of pesto. I like pesto. I love pesto. And I have a specific use for it. I make a traditional pesto, which is basil, either pine nuts or walnuts. I actually prefer almonds that I roast for about 10 minutes in the oven at about 350 degrees. That's about 175, 177 Celsius. So basil, nuts, cheese, Parmesan. I like Romano. It's a little bit saltier. Olive oil, and of course garlic. And I put some salt in there as well. And what I like to do is trim lamb. I buy the leg of lamb that they sell at Costco. It's boneless. It's not expensive. And I'll buy 2 at a time. Trim them to get all the fat off, as much as I can. Not all of it, but most of the fat off. And from out of the inside. It's boneless, so you can spread it out after you take the elastic casing off the outside. And then I would make a lot of pesto and spread the pesto on the inside of the meat, roll it back up, tie it, spread the outside with pesto, wrap it in plastic, leave it in the refrigerator overnight. Then the next day, heat the oven up, take the plastic off, but leave all the pesto on, put it in a roasting pan, and then roast it until it gets up to about 125, 130 degrees. I want it medium rare. I don't like it cooked too much. Anyways, that's the way I commonly use pesto. But I got this idea. What more can you do with pesto? What are some ways you can make pesto that'll be a little bit different to use in different ways? So pesto on fish is common, on pasta especially, pesto on chicken breast. That's a very, very good way to eat pesto and eat chicken. But what are some different things you can do? And that's what I did that day. So I made a traditional pesto. That's in the video. I made one pesto with olives. I buy these olives at a local store down in the city. There's a couple of stores down there that sell them. They're really dark. They're like sun-dried, somewhat dried, and packed in some oil. What's that plane going overhead? And they make a really dark pesto. There's a friend of mine who loves lamb. He likes lamb too. I actually prefer lamb to beef. He's a big beef eater, but I like lamb. And to me, lamb has more flavor. Beef to me is too bland. But I'll make that olive pesto and use that with lamb sometimes. That's good. And then I tried a mint pesto where I used the basil, but I added mint to it, and that was good. You could taste the mint in it. I would consider that suitable mostly for lamb, but it might be good on some cuts of fish. And then I made a very herby pesto where I added to that the regular ingredients. I added cilantro, rosemary, and Italian parsley. So it had more of an herbal flavor to it. That was very good too. And I would use that on pasta as well as fish and other foods, not just lamb. And then it's not in the recipe, but I have it separate on my website. I made a pesto with sun-dried tomatoes. Not just, but I added it to the basil and other ingredients. Sun-dried tomatoes all chopped up and ground up. That was really good. And that was especially good on pasta. But I would put that on pizza. I would like to try that on pizza, and then with the cheese and so forth. But use that. Maybe add more tomato sauce to make it a little bit saucier. But put that on pizza. I think that would be good. Now, I'm bringing all of this up because someone came to me and they said, they tasted my pesto, and they said, "Why is your pesto so good? And mine never tastes this good." They use the same ingredients, but what were they doing wrong? And it's always the same thing. They go for convenience rather than hard work and therefore quality. They throw all their ingredients in a food processor, whip it up, done. They call that pesto. Well, you have to go back to how pesto used to be made. It was crushed. And what they would use, and I got a small one here, they use, of course, much bigger ones, a mortar and pestle. And this is how I used to make pesto. I would put the leaves in there and just crush. And the reason why is because to get the really good flavor of pesto, you have to release the juice that's locked up in the leaves. To just chop it up in a food processor, you're going to get some of the juice out, but a lot of it's going to still remain in there, and all you're going to get is basically the flavor of chopped basil. You want that juice. And so I used to use this when my carpal tunnel syndrome flared up. It doesn't bother me anymore because I have an ergonomic keyboard for my computers, but it used to bother me a lot. Now, what I started doing instead, rather than using the mortar and pestle, I started putting the leaves inside of a Ziploc bag, a sturdy freezer Ziploc bag, not just a regular storage bag. The plastic's too thin on those. And then I started crushing the leaves. And what I had been using, this is a tenderizing mallet. You don't use the tooth side, obviously. You'll tear up the bag, but you can use the smooth side. You just have to be careful of these edges because they will cut through the plastic sometimes. And just crush. Put it on a good surface that you don't have to worry about it being damaged, and just hammer the basil, and you'll see it turn dark and juices will start to come out. I used to use this. I've done this. This is a device for flattening meat, like if you're making scallopini with veal, or you want to make scallopini or with chicken breasts or chicken cutlets, and you put your chicken down between two pieces of plastic or wax paper or parchment paper, and you hammer the chicken down till you get it really flat and thin. That's what this is for. And you can use this for crushing basil. I use this many times. This is a rubber mallet, and I bought this in a hardware store. I think it was Home Depot, where they sell tools. And I would just use this to hammer the basil. It makes a lot of noise, so I would do it outside in the driveway, and I would put a sheet of cardboard down, and I would just sit there on the pavement, on the concrete, and just hammer my basil, and people are looking out the windows like, what's he doing out there? But they know that I do some weird cooking, and they benefit because they get some of the food. Now, broken heart time, sad time, play a violin. I love to use this. This is what I use most now for making pesto. This is called a whacker spoon. The last time I looked, it was no longer available on Amazon, nor was the website whackerspoon.com on the internet anymore. So Bob Evans, who made these, isn't making them anymore. I know him because he and his wife own a shop down in the city on the main street. And I was drop in whenever I was down there. I would drop in, say hi to Bob, see what he was doing, what his latest things were. He used to make these. The problem with it is they were very expensive. Last time I looked, they were like $38 on Amazon. It's solid aluminum. Aluminum is very expensive, and he claimed that he used aviation grade aluminum. They didn't make it here in town. They had a forge down in the city, down in Los Angeles. And they used to make them down there and then get them all polished up. He called it a whacker spoon when Julia Child named it such. Julia Child used to live here in town, over in Montecito, and he gave one to her. And he had some kind of a technical name for it. I don't know what it was. But Julia Child took it and said, no, that's a whacker spoon. That's what she did with it. And that's how it got named. A whacker spoon. And he even put his name on it. He would hand carve his name on it, Bob Evans. It's B and then something, it's a squiggle. But they don't make these anymore. But this was my favorite tool. However, you can use the other implements that I've got, the other tools. But again, the real trick is to get those basil leaves crushed down. Another trick is finding good basil, because it's not always easy to find good basil in the store. I go into the grocery store and try to find basil there. It's all limp. It's starting to turn gray. It's not going to have a lot of juice in it. The best basil, when I can find it, is at the farmer's market. And there were a couple of people there who sold the plant with the roots still on, and it was a good-sized plant. It wasn't this little tiny bunch. The sad part about some of the farmers market people is that they're not growing the food themselves. If you go down to the other side of the city, There's a wholesale produce market down there. I can buy a 1 pound bag of basil down there. I've done that, fresh basil, and it's typically it's good and it's fresh because they sell a lot of produce, so it doesn't sit in there for very long. That to me is the best source if I can't get it at a farmer's market. But some of those farmers market people do the same thing. They go and buy the bag, they bring it home, bunch it up into little smaller pieces. They might spend $5 for the bag. They'll get 10 or 15 little bunches out of it and charge $1 a piece for them. So I always look for the people who sell the plants. And the other way, if you've got growing room around your home, is go to a nursery that sells herbs. Like the local Home Depot store has a nursery right next door as part of the store. Go there in spring, like February, March, and buy basil. After the last frost of the season has passed, this is Southern California, so I can go over there in January or February and buy basil. And then plant it either in your yard or in pots and just let it grow. Keep it well watered. It'll grow 3 or 4 feet tall. And what the advantage to that is you get the nice big leaves that have a lot of juice in them. The stuff they sell in the store are little tiny leaves, and you have to buy like 6, 8 of these bunches at $1.99 each or $2.99 each. Some of them even rooted. But again, little tiny leaves. You just don't get much out of it. So to me, ideally, the 2 ideal sources, 3 if you've got one. The third is if you have a wholesale produce market somewhere close to your town or in town where you can buy like a big bag of basil. But either a farmer's market or go to a nursery and grow your own. I prefer to grow my own because I can just let it sit in the ground or in pots really long time till it gets up to full size. Then I can get some good basil out of it. So that's kind of how I make pesto. It's great stuff. I love it with lamb. There are things that I want to try with it, like making that sun-dried tomato pesto and trying that on pizza. I've never done that idea. I think it's a great idea. So if you've got the supplies there and you've got the tools for making pesto, don't just throw your leaves in the food processor. Crush them down well in a plastic bag, a sturdy plastic bag, and then put them in a food processor with the oil and the nuts, the cheese, and so forth, and whir that up. And I think you'll find that your pesto will have a lot better flavor to it. A little addenda here. You may notice there's a slight color change in the video. I'm doing this at a different time of day. I got another idea. Because I want to be fair to the people who have been supportive of my website and my videos. I don't want them to have to pay, but let everybody else pay. So here's the thought. Okay, those of you who know my pattern, you know that on Sundays during most of the year, I upload my latest video and I feature it on my website. During summer when it's too hot to cook, I'll do something every other week, and sometimes it's an old video so that I don't have to do any cooking. Okay, so when I feature a video, I'll talk about it in my kitchen vlog so that you know that it's there, and you can go to my website and you can look it up. And I'll have the green view the video button on the recipe page on my website, right? So if it's pesto, you go to pesto page and you look it up. Okay, and for the entire week, that button will link directly to the unlisted hidden video on YouTube so that you can watch it for free without having to pay anything to Patreon. Then at the end of the week or the beginning of the next week, I'll take that green button down. So then it's up to the Patreon patrons to support the video at that point. And then whatever the new recipe might be, it could be the lamb and pappardelle that I'm working on, that will be up. And you can watch that one for free. It'll be announced. So that way, those of you who have been with me for a long time, you know my pattern, you watch my vlogs, you'll know what's there. You'll have an entire week to watch it without having to give anything to Patreon. And then after that, it'll be gone, but you'll have seen it. And then the Patreon patrons will support it. So let me know if you think that's a good or a bad idea. I'm trying to be, like I said, trying to be fair to the people who have gotten my videos for free for a long time. One other advantage that you'll have, though, is if you do it through my website, that green button, you won't have to deal with any advertisements. So that's an idea that I'm working on. So that's my take, my story on pesto. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And if you can, get on to Patreon and subscribe there. For a small amount, you can subscribe for $1 a month. I need the subscribers to get my Patreon account really going. So thanks for listening.